Okay, so this is part 2 of chapter 8 on the executive office and the plural executive. So we're going to be focusing on the plural executive. In the last section, I showed you an organizational chart like that graphic. And so what the plural executive means, I'm going to be defining that for you. But more than anything else is that because of the situation that was set up under the 1869 Constitution way back when and the E.J. Davis fiasco, that the state of Texas said we don't want any one executive officer like the governor, for example, because they're talking about E.J. Davis having so much power in the state of Texas. The state of Texas is going to have a different system where power is going to be shared amongst different elected officials that we call the plural executive. So we will be defining the plural executive. I'll be telling you who is going to be part of the plural executive. And as I said, these were listed in that organizational chart and that was in the first section. And so I'm going to be telling you what each of these people do, like their role in the role in running the state of Texas. I'm going to be doing a short part on bureaucracy and defining what bureaucracy is and how bureaucracy contributes to public policy. And I'm going to be presenting a policy model of how laws get passed in the state of Texas, and they call it the Iron Texas Star. Okay, I keep talking about the plural executive and the plural executive. So this is a definition of the plural executive. It's the system in which executive power is divided among several statewide offices based on the Texas Constitution. It's the system in which executive power is divided among several statewide offices based on the Texas Constitution. And so all of these are statewide elected positions. All of these run based on their party labels. All of these are currently Republicans, and they serve 4-year terms. All right, I'm going to be telling you about some of the more important ones, or the ones that I think are more important. And the first one I want to talk about is the Office of the Attorney General of Texas. Okay, so this is kind of like the head attorney, the head lawyer for the state. And so what he does is that he provides counsel to the governor and or state agencies. And that's another way of saying if for some reason the state of Texas is sued, and you know what, the U.S. government sues the state of Texas on a pretty regular basis. And not only that, the state of Texas sues the U.S. government on a pretty regular basis. And it's this Office of the Attorney General that does that. They do a lot of the civil stuff, and we're going to be talking more about civil cases and criminal cases in the next section on law and the courts. They will do some criminal stuff, but not, it's kind of limited, so it's not really too much. It's mostly civil stuff. The Office of the Attorney General of Texas also has this huge child support program. And so any woman who's currently receiving any kind of state aid, it's like welfare, if you want to call it, or TANF, it's called TANF now, has to cooperate with the Office of the Attorney General in order for the fathers or the non-custodial parents of that child be set up with some kind of child support, and so that they can collect child support on behalf of that particular woman, but do it for the state. There's also some units that will do the ones where the woman's not on welfare, and that's a service that's provided by the Office of the Attorney General of Texas as well, although I think there is a charge for that. Another one, I kind of talked a little bit about this, is the Crime Victims Compensation Program, that if you or your family has been a victim of violent crime, that you can get some kind of assistance from the Attorney General's office, and it depends on the county. But here, you know, the police will refer you to the DA's office, and the DA's office will work with you and with the Attorney General's Crime Victims Compensation Program to help you bury your loved one, to offer counseling centers, medical bills, or whatever. So there's money set up for that. The Attorney General's office also has a big office for Medicare fraud, and so if they will be tracking, or if they get some kind of, usually it's like somebody calls in an anonymous tip, like a whistleblower saying, oh, this healthcare provider is committing Medicare fraud. Well, they will go in and investigate, and if they find that there is Medicaid fraud, that is a criminal offense, and they will take that person to court. So that's kind of where the criminal part comes in. There's also a big consumer protection unit and that one is usually just out of Austin. But if you're having any kind of problems with, let's see, how can I say it, with a vendor that, even though you're saying this is not working or whatever, and so the vendor doesn't want to cooperate with you, that you can go to the Attorney General's office's Consumer Protection program, and they can help you. So let me give you an example of the last one. It used to be that if you bought a car, you're kind of stuck with it, even though it was a bad car. And so they in Texas they passed like the limit law that if you buy a car and within so many period of time you have like so many breakdowns, you can take the car back and they have to give you a full refund or a new car. Or I don't know what exactly the provisions are, but they did it because people were being taken advantage of and they had no protection whatsoever. So this Consumer Protection Office kind of like stepped in and they got a law passed to try to stop that. Anyway, so the Office of the Attorney General is often seen as a stepping stone to higher level office. For example, our current governor, Greg Abbott, was the Attorney General for the state of Texas. Okay, the next office that I want to talk about, which is part of this pool executive, is the Comptroller of Public Accounts. And you can kind of think of this particular office as being like the CFO for the state. And so what this one does, I told you that the Legislative Budget Board will say this is how much we need to run the state. Well, it's this one, the Comptroller of Public Accounts says, yeah, but this is how much money we're going to have. So they do the revenue forecasting and economic growth forecasting for the state. And so she's considered, and I think it's a he right now, this person is considered to be the chief tax collector for the state, the chief investor for the state funds. So they will do revenue forecasting, and they do that based on the sales taxes that are going to be coming in. We had some recent downturns in the economy, and they were saying we have to cut the budget, we're not going to have as much money or whatever. But the last couple of go-rounds of the legislative sessions, we've actually had surpluses, not deficits, surpluses. The other thing the Comptroller of Public Accounts will do is that they will audit the property appraisal district. So let me explain just a little bit about this one. Each county has an appraisal district that tells each homeowner how much that property is valued at, what it's appraised at. And so you will pay property taxes based on the valuation of that property and what's called the millage rate, the amount that these governing bodies for the local areas, like the city council, the county commissioners, or whatever, how much they're adding up, because there's a cap on it. It cannot be more than a certain amount. And so this Comptroller of Public Accounts will go and they will audit these districts to make sure that they're not overvaluing, overinflating the value of the house just to collect more money. So that's one of the roles that they play. Now, to me, the most important role that the comptroller has is that I told you when we talked about the Constitution that Texas can never run in the red. Well, it is the comptroller's responsibility to say, hey man, we're starting to run in the red, or I am forecasting that in so many months we're going to start running a deficit. So we need to do something now. So she'll go to the governor, she'll go to the legislature, and she'll say, hey, we need to do something. So what they will have to do is that the governor will say, you know what, we need to go ahead and stop spending. We will have to ask for some money back so we will not run in the red, and that's called a budget rescission. And that has happened several years in a row, especially when Texas was not doing very well, when the economy was not doing very well. They asked for money back. They said, state agencies, give us back money. The largest cut that we had was like 12%, and that's a lot. I mean, that's really a lot. Okay, this other commissioner that forms part of the plural executive is called the Commissioner of the General Land Office. And you probably have never even heard of this one, but this particular office is responsible for administering state-owned lands, providing oversight, that watchdog function for state-owned lands and the coastal part. And you would probably know this particular office, or if you have ever heard of this office, it would be more for the coastal part because we live on the coast. And so every time that a beach needs to be refurbished or whatever, like more sand needs to be brought in, it is this office, the General Land Office, that will give us the money to do it. So they have responsibility for the administration oversight of state-owned lands and the coastal lands extending 10.3 miles into the Gulf. Okay, so what he does is that if you look out into the Bay of Corpus Christi Bay, you'll see that there's some rigs out there, right? Okay, well that's like within that 10.3 miles. So it is the General Land Office that gave these people permission to go ahead and put up those rigs there, because we're going to be getting some money from that as well. So it leases state lands and generates revenue from oil and gas production. So I don't like seeing them out there, but hey, they're there. What can you say? All right, and so what this one does, this office does, the General Land Office, they also have a huge environmental component, and mostly it's like a legal type of environmental component. And so they maintain environmental quality for all of the open beaches, everything that has to do with our Open Beaches Act. Because in the state of Texas, we cannot have private beaches. They have to be public beaches. They have to be open beaches. Okay, and briefly, the last one commission I want to talk about in terms of the plural executive is the Texas Railroad Commission. And so they don't really regulate railroads so much anymore. They do regulate some aspects of the transportation, but really what you may or may not know them for, the important part of their job is that they regulate the oil and the gas industry. They set the prices for the oil and the gas industry. This is the one that people know the very least about, but they play a pretty important role in the state of Texas. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about bureaucracy and public policy. And so I've kind of mentioned that word bureaucracy before. And so let me just kind of explain a little bit about what a bureaucracy is. You know, there are both public bureaucracies and there are private bureaucracies. And basically, this is just saying it is an organization that is huge, that there has to be like a special type or specialization within that bureaucracy to do different things, to be able to get a business going or to govern a particular part of the public sector. Okay, let me give you an example of a private bureaucracy. Has anybody ever had to deal with Time Warner Cable? And so they keep like switching you around to different types of departments. One handles this, one handles that, the other one handles the other. All right, that's a private bureaucracy. It's huge. That's a private sector bureaucracy. So we're going to be talking about it more in terms of the public sector. So it's a system of officials and their employees administering or managing government policies and programs. And so this is the deal. You may say, well, I've never had to deal with a bureaucracy, but actually you have. Like if you have a Texas driver's license, you had to go and get one, right? So that's part of the Texas bureaucracy. It's the Department of Public Safety. You are a student at this institution, and it's a state institution, and we are a major bureaucracy where you have to go one place to do this, you have to go to another place to do that. All right, so this is like how a particular agency is going to be administered. All right, so that's the bureaucracy. And so what this whole lecture about is like, does the bureaucracy, do these public agencies, how do they play a role in making laws in the state of Texas? You know, there are many different what are called sub-government models or models of the policy-making process, and the bureaucracy does have a role to play in helping to make public policy, because what they say is that people that run these bureaucracies, that are running these programs, they know best about what needs to be done, you know, for the laws, or what kind of laws need to be passed to help their clientele groups. And so that's why it becomes important that the bureaucracy does have a role to play in a lot of these laws that are being passed, both at the national level, and there are models for that, yes, but this one that we're going to be talking about is about Texas specifically. Okay, the book introduces this particular sub-government model, and it's called the Iron Texas Star. So let's start on the left-hand side at one of the points that says Lieutenant Governor. Now I told you that the Lieutenant Governor really is in charge of a lot of stuff, right? and that he plays a role in both the institution called the legislature and in the institution called the executive office through this plural executive. Okay, so at this particular point of the star, it's the lieutenant governor, all of the legislative institutions like the legislative budget board that we were talking about, and all of the standing committees that are in the Senate, where he has appointive powers over those. Now, at the bottom point, you have the Speaker of the House. You have the legislative institutions that are associated with the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and then you have all of the House standing committees. So that's the legislative part of it, and they're the ones that make the laws. Okay, then on the other side, you have the plural executive. You have the office of the governor, and the governor's office uses its legislative aides. Then in the bottom point of the star, you see the boards, the commissions, and the administrators for the public agencies, and the governor is the one who appoints all of these people to serve on these boards and commissions. And then at the very top point, you see special interest groups, and read that business interest groups. Okay, so that's the Iron Texas Star. Let's talk about how it's going to work. Okay, so this hands-on authority of the lieutenant governor and the Speaker of the House, their ability to appoint the chairs and the committee members on the legislative side. The governor, through his appointive powers, the boards, the commissions, these top level administrators. And all of these are very pro-business. So it's the economic interest groups that are the mortar that holds this whole star together to make statutes in the state of Texas. So this should kind of tell you, because of the way that this Iron Texas Star is set up, laws that are passed in Texas are going to be somewhat predictable, that are going to be favorable to business, that are going to be favorable more at this particular point in time because everybody's a conservative, to the Republican Party, to the conservatives. So it's the on the legislative side, the lieutenant governor, the Speaker of the House, their ability to appoint all these chairs and the committee members. The governor, because he has his legislative staff, because he has the ability to appoint boards, commissions, top level administrators. And then the economic interest groups, the business groups, the mortar that's going to hold all of these together. So it makes it somewhat predictable. Okay, and so the way that it works is this. So the law is passed, and then after this law or the statute is passed, then it goes to the different types of agencies to implement them, to write the regulatory policy, to make the rules, to be able to implement the programs. So so the law is passed, the programs are set up, the agencies write the regulations and implement the programs, and so they're basically going to be based on the ideology for each of these players that we talked about in the Iron Texas Star.